Hey, welcome to the Wrestlers Wrestling Show. We're back after a long hiatus, and what better way to kick it back than with my good friend, Be Cool. And today we're going to talk about comedy wrestling. Probably, I would say, one of the hardest forms of pro wrestling to kind of master. And I think you'd be a really great person to talk about what goes into essentially being, what do you think is the best elements that make a good comedy wrestler?
To make a good comedy wrestler?
Yeah.
It's really tough. The first and foremost thing you need to be is funny. That'll be the key to being a good comedy wrestler. But really, you have to have the fundamentals down. If I was to tell anyone who wanted to be a comedy wrestler, it's to have be able to wrestle, be able to take moves, and be able to take them well. Because as a comedy wrestler, especially if you're going down being a heel, you're going to get beaten up. So you want to be able to go. So if you're training, that's the way I would go. Is learn how to actually wrestle, and then let your character come true.
Yeah. I always say to some of the people who train at the Irish School of Wrestling that anyone can be a pro wrestler. You just got to find what it is that you are particularly good at. So say some people might be athletically gifted, like a Will Ospreay, for instance, or a Mark Haskins. And then there's some people that just kind of have a knack for the brawling aspect. What kind of drew you? I know you're a funny guy outside the wrestling business, but what kind of drew you towards going in the comedy aspect of wrestling?
Well, when I started wrestling, I started when I was 14 with the intent on being the next Shawn Michaels. Okay, that's not a joke.
Didn't we all?
And I wanted to be that serious wrestler, but I was being put on these shows, and as I said, I was 15, 16, and I looked it. I didn't look like a wrestler, and I was in with my partner and my tag team partner, and we were trying to come up with a way to stand out, to actually be wrestlers. So we started going down the comedy route then. We were comedy heels. That's how we came into it. So I started at a very young age, and I started to figure out kind of early on what worked and what didn't work in comedy wrestling.
Yeah. What would be, say, your influences? What do you look for to get ideas for good comedy wrestling?
Oh, that's very good, because there is no one in particular. When I started wrestling, of course, one of my coaches done comedy, and I kind of got into, I'd be able to pick their brain about comedy wrestling. Then as I got older and I was going out on my own, I didn't really have any comedy wrestler that I'd look at and think, he's funny, I'm going to do A, B and C. I kind of got more from comedy movies or films or books, and that's how. And then it was just my natural reaction to real life situations that would get awkward would be to crack a joke, and people would laugh. And then when I started doing that in a wrestling match, that's how I started becoming funny. So there was no real, in particular, inspiration to do comedy spots. But if there was a wrestler that would have influenced me, it would have been Andy Kaufman. And more so the movie. The man in the movie introduced me to it, and I would have been wrestling about 2 years when I first saw that, and to see this guy come out, and the line in the movie was, "These guys are massive, they'll crush you." And he goes, "I'm not going to wrestle the guys." And he went and he started wrestling the women. And I remember watching that thinking, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
So that really influenced me.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about kind of movie influences, because I'm not going to name drop on this, but I remember talking to a pretty established wrestler, and he said, don't ever copy other wrestlers, because they're out there doing that. If you want to kind of get fresh ideas, look for kind of movies. So it's kind of interesting that you said Andy Kaufman. But going back to how close is Be Cool to Barry? Barry being your shoot name, by the way, just for those who don't know.
Kayfabe. That's a good question. I would like to
That's why I do this show. Good question.
If the promoting doesn't work out for you, and it's not, I would like to think that I am as far away from Be Cool.
I have news for you.
Yeah, I know. I would have liked to have thought I was as far away from Be Cool as possible, but maybe sometimes I might catch myself saying something that I shouldn't say.
Yeah.
Or
a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I go, oh, that's something I should say in a promo, and not in real life. So I'd say, unfortunately, a little bit close.
Yeah. Another question would be, say it's okay if you're wrestling somebody who is comedy themselves, right? Because it's just a meshing of the two styles, right? What advice would you give to somebody who is trying to follow a career in comedy wrestling, but they're up against somebody who just doesn't want to do the style? Just shoots. You're in there with somebody, and I'm sure this has happened to you. You're trying to put a match back together, and you want to do a bit of ha, and they're shooting everything down. What would you say? What advice would you give?
It has happened. It happened to me before when I was doing a spot with someone, and I had a T-shirt of their face printed on it, and I had a T-shirt of my face printed on it, and I gave it to them to wear.
Yeah.
And they said no. They said no. I couldn't get over it because they were comedy as well.
Yeah.
So I said, all right. And very difficult to plan with, very difficult to work with. And I said, all right, I forgot about it. But when we went out, I had my jacket on, I took my jacket off, and I had her face on it. Pop. But then
Big giveaway.
Yeah.
Comment below, with this match. No, I'm joking.
I took out the T-shirt that had my face on it, I showed the crowd, and the crowd popped, and then they had to put the T-shirt on because the crowd popped for it.
That's cheeky.
But at the same time, everything, it was a nightmare to plan, and I just said to myself, you know what, fuck them. And that has happened in the past. Lads will shoot ideas down, and then I'll say, right, we'll do the match they want to have, but I'm going to react how I react.
I don't know if this is kind of the advice that you want to give to the young generation. Fuck them. But,
you got to look after number one. No, you have to, yeah, maybe if you wanted to edit that bit out.
Yeah, it can. I suppose it can be hard when you're trying to mix in that you are a comedy wrestler, but someone's kind of going the more serious route. Can
I just? That's fine. That's fine. If someone's going serious, they don't have to do comedy. You're doing comedy. Just because you're comedy doesn't mean whoever you're with is doing comedy.
Yeah.
You can do your comedy and then get beaten up and take and do whatever they want to do, and how you react is the comedy.
Yeah.
They're not coming down to the levels of comedy if they don't want to do it.
Yeah. How much when you go to a show? Okay, obviously you're most of your stuff is kind of comedy. How much would you plan in advance?
So it depends who I'm.
So let's just say you're working a fellow Irish performer. Would you be planning much in advance, or would it be just more on the day?
I like to know who I was going to. So when I say plan, I would watch their matches. I wouldn't necessarily come up with spots. I wouldn't sit there and think I need a good spot for this match, because I liked relying on my reactions. I always thought how I reacted was going to be what would make the match funny. I said it before, where you and I could go out and do two different matches and say you do one spot and I'm going to do the exact same spot. How I react doing that spot can make that spot, even though it's move for move the same, but how we react in it makes the spot completely different.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how I would prepare for a match.
Yeah. I suppose as well, like I always say, the foundation of wrestling is selling and reacting. Okay, without those two ingredients, wrestling just doesn't work. Okay, I probably put selling as probably the most important aspect of pro wrestling, but I suppose it's probably how do you doing comedy wrestling? How would you plan backstage to make sure that people are selling kind of the punchlines of the comedy that you're doing? I mean, that's kind of important, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because that's the payoff is the.
Sometimes it doesn't always. Sometimes what you think is the punchline, they might start cracking up at the setup to something, and you just have to roll with that. It's the same with anything in wrestling. If something in the match, isn't working, you just have to roll with it. You can't stop and say don't laugh yet. yeah, you can't really prepare. Sometimes you just know you're 100% sure that this is going to land and it's going to get the right pop. So a good example is when I'm doing the promo just before the match. I come out and I do the AO. In my head, I have a few bullet points of jokes I want to say, and I'll say one joke I think's hilarious, and it doesn't get that big a pop. And then what I say isn't funny. What I don't think is funny, it can get quite a big reaction, and I just have to go with it. I just have to think it right.
Yeah. Putting, I would say, probably the two best comedy wrestling matches in OTT, I suppose, if you want, and they're up on YouTube for free. The 5-man, 6-man. I people kind of, to me, when I tell them that match was more or less planned on the day, and I suppose when you involve Team Prick, you're talking about 7, and Foxy is 8, right? So 8 people got together on that day, just on that day, because the rest of the lads were flying in from Birmingham. So 8 people, minus, I suppose, a lot of ego, because that match wouldn't work if there was a lot of ego. Tell me about what would go into planning, and obviously Foxy is not backstage there with you, that he's able to be there in all of the conversations. Foxy's running back and he's doing matches as well. And then also as well, you throw into the element that you have 2 rather kind of new lads who were Team Prick at the time, 2 young lads that you're putting a lot of faith in as well, that they, and if you watch the match, look, the match is free on YouTube. If you watch the match, the two young lads, Team Prick, they nailed it, didn't they?
Everyone, I think, done really well. And Foxy, in fairness, was fantastic. Foxy really understands his role, and that's what made the match good. Was it? Everyone involved in the match knew their role. And I mean, you had Pete Dunne, you had Tyler. These lads could do anything. Yeah. Really, really talented wrestlers. And if they wanted to make that match something different, they would have. But we all understood no one went out there trying to outshine one another. Yeah. We understood what the match was. It's an outrageous concept. The 5-man, 6-man. Yeah. We're both trying to get Tyler. Everyone understand their role. We done a lovely little promo the day to set it up, and everything kind of just went together. Yeah.
But was there any kind of difficulty planning, or was just everyone just a pro?
No,
everyone was
just spot on. We all, everyone had their own input. There was no one left out. That match wouldn't have worked with anyone else. If you took Pete out for someone else, you took me out, took Dara out. Yeah. Everyone really contributed, and everyone, it was like someone came up with a spot, and then someone else would say, "Oh, how about we add this little bit onto it, or we take this little bit away from it?" And you're like, "Yeah, that makes sense." Yeah. We all worked really well together.
So it's essentially 8 people coming together to work for the match, as opposed to the ego of themselves, I suppose. You think that's probably important?
Yeah, and I worked really well with all those lads, and Trent especially. There's another really good comedy match we done, and I think it's online as well. It's myself versus Martina and Jordan in a 2-on-1 match. Yeah. And
that's in Belfast, I think.
In Belfast, and out of nowhere we're going for the hot tag, and a 2-on-1 match, and Trent Seven just comes out from nowhere to this big huge pop, and we knew didn't matter what he done in the ring. This is a comedy match, he wants people to laugh, so he comes out, he gets this huge pop. I get the hot tag. Oh my god, it's Pete Dunne. Get the hot tag. He comes in and he gets cut off straight away. To a big pop, and we didn't need to do anything. Yeah. We could have done nothing up in that match to that point, and the people would have been up here once he came out.
And a funny background story, Trent wasn't supposed to be on that show, but he just went out with all the OTT crew, got hammered, and was like, "I'm not going to make that flight." And I woke up the next day with a text message saying, "Hey Joe, I'm coming to Belfast. What do you got for me?" And
it worked.
And that magic worked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever. Before we wrap it up, I have 2 more questions. Tell me about the planning, also available for free on YouTube, the match that you had with Orange Cassidy. How was that the plan, and what went into it,
Well, that was a difficult one, in the sense that I was just starting to portray a new character, and I was still trying to figure out the best way to get myself established. But Orange Cassidy was such a pro with the whole helping me get over, and I knew me putting him over would put me over. Everything we benefited off one another. And I came to that match with lots of ideas, lots of ideas, and I came with 2 new ideas that he had never heard before. And he said that he's going to take them with him and still use them. So that was a really cool thing. And, you know, it was just a thing where we met and talked, and that was it. We didn't get into the ring, done nothing like that. He was the pro, you know, he's wrestling a lot longer than me, so I was going to let him. But he was very accommodating of everything I wanted to do.
Yeah. I think as well, and I say this to some of the students as well, I think if you watch that match, what makes it great is that it's 2 people being in the ring, being very comfortable doing nothing. Most people, when they're in the ring and they're not doing anything, they panic.
Yeah.
And I think when you watch that match back, it's 2 people being incredibly comfortable doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, you have to do nothing.
Yeah.
That's kind of his gimmick.
Yeah.
But when he was doing the whole thing, we were doing a spot where he was taking glasses off. I can't really remember it, but that would have been ruined if I started overselling it.
Exactly.
Yeah, kind of. You have to react, but you can't react so much that it's going to take away.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for students, I suppose of wrestling in general, that's one match that you probably need to watch back and see 2 people just being incredibly comfortable doing nothing, and not, as you said, kind of overshadowing each other. We'll wrap it up on this. What is your favourite match, and why is it your favourite match?
Boy, that's a good question. I'd probably say the Orange Cassidy match. Because,
really?
Yeah, you know, that was going into a time where the Angel Cruisers tag team we had split, and it was very, you know, what was I going to do next? You know, I think a lot of people might have wanted Angel Cruz to get that match with Orange Cassidy, and that's fair enough because he was the Shawn Michaels of the Angel Cruisers, and I wasn't even Marty Jannetty. You know what I mean?
Can relieve Cassidy.
Yeah. So I felt I had something to prove, and you know that everything just worked in that match. I wouldn't change anything about that match. It's one of the only matches I walked to the back from and been like very happy with that.
I think it would be silly for me not to ask one last question. Any advice for people? As I said, I always say that anyone could be a wrestler. You just got to find what your best attributes are that you can give to the wrestling business, right? You chose the comedy route because that you're a funny guy, right? But in terms of like people who want to go out and, you know, pursue comedy wrestling, what advice would you give those young people?
That want to pursue comedy?
Yeah, I've decided I think comedy might be my thing that I can bring to wrestling.
Be prepared for everyone to think you're shit. Yeah.
What if you are just shit though? Because I mean, I tried comedy and I fucking failed. Desperately.
Not really. You know, when you were doing the promos, they're comedy.
But a comedy match I failed in. Like I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the time, and I just, you know.
You know, if you're looking to get into comedy wrestling, it's hard to get into it. I kind of fell into it. You know, I didn't choose comedy wrestling. It chose me. If you're going to come in, the best advice I can give anyone, and it kind of goes back to all wrestling. If you go into wrestling thinking, this is going to be my gimmick, this is going to be how I wrestle, 9 times out of 10 it doesn't go like that. You get told, I need you to do a 5-minute squash here. Best advice I can give anyone, if you're young and you want to get into wrestling, you know, put things like school and college first. Do things that would benefit your wrestling, you know, eating healthy, going to the gym, get a background sport, jiu-jitsu, boxing, football, even 5-a-side football, because that will help you get subconsciously you're learning footwork. Footwork's a very hard thing to teach and to learn, but if you have that, you'll subconsciously get it. And then just train, just come training, even if you're getting down to twice a month if you're in school, and then after that you can give it the whole hog. And don't rush anything. Don't force anything. If you're forcing a gimmick, it won't work. If you're forcing comedy, it's not going to work. Let it, you know, click. I've seen lads so many, and they come down and they wanted to be they're big jack guys, and they wanted to just beat people up. But they're funny. They're really funny. And when he started doing comedy, he started getting a push because he could do it. So that'll happen. You have lads who come down who want to do comedy, but they're not funny. but they're actually quite talented wrestlers.
Mm.
So don't rush what you want to do.
Yeah.
Come down, train, and what happens
Say a
naturally.
prayer as you out.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Low talking.
Love them. All right. Next time.